A minute here. Welcome to SEMC's second May virtual program, excuse me, Planning for Collection Storage. My name is Zinnia Willits, and I am the Executive Director of the Southeastern Museums Conference. My pronouns are she, her. For virtual accessibility, I offer the following visual description of myself. I'm a light-skinned white female with reddish-brown hair, and today I have on white sleeveless sweater. A warm welcome to all of our members joining us today, as well as those who may be new to the Southeastern Museums Conference, which we often shorten to just SEMC. SEMC is a regional professional organization representing museums and museum staff in the 12 Southeastern states, as well as the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. We have a membership of 2,000 and continue to grow. Please consider joining SEMC, where access to virtual programs is always free with membership, which starts at just $45. We're pleased to continue the 2024 virtual program series with this discussion focused on best practices, solutions, and ideas to create a sustainable and adaptable collections storage environment. As someone who worked in collections for almost 20 years, I was excited to see this topic brought forth for a discussion. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and thank today's program sponsor, Patterson Pope, a longtime SEMC partner and supporter. Through this sponsorship, we were able to offer free registration for all. Thank you also to today's speakers, Erica Haig, Kristen Orman, Stephen Mott, and Jean Riley, for taking the time to share their experiences with storage planning, and to Calvin James for moderating. Professional development is a year-round endeavor for SEMC, and we're appreciative of everyone's commitment to both present and attend. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Heather Nowak, SEMC's Program Administrator, to review some session housekeeping information before we begin the discussion.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's program. As Zinnia mentioned, my name is Heather Nowak. My pronouns are she, her. For a visual description, I'm a fair-skinned white female with shoulder-length dark brown hair. And today I'm wearing a peach-colored shirt with flowy sleeves. Before jumping in, a few things to cover. If you need closed captioning, it is available. Simply click the CC button in your Zoom screen and enable the auto transcription feature. You can also download a full transcript of the program by clicking More at the bottom of your Zoom screen, choose Captions, and then View Full Transcript. The program today will be recorded and emailed to each of you. Georgia professionals, I would like to personally invite you to join us in person for SEMC's first Mix and Mingle in Atlanta, Georgia. This is both for members and non-members to gather for networking and camaraderie. Everyone is welcome, so if you happen to be in the area, we would love to see you. I'll share the details in the chat. And speaking of the chat for today's program, we encourage you to introduce yourself and share information and ideas. If you have any questions, we do ask that you put them in the Q&A box so we can address them. At the end of the program, I'll post an evaluation as well, so please fill that out. We would love to hear your feedback. And now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Calvin James with Patterson Pope, our program sponsor, to get today's discussion started. Calvin.
Thanks, Heather. And good morning, everybody. We are super excited to be with you today. We're really going to talk about planning for storage in two situations. First, renovations, and second, in new construction. And we have a great panel to discuss those things. First, we're going to focus on renovation when you're planning for collection storage in that situation. And we have Erica Haig and Jean Riley joining us. Come on in, guys. Erica is the collections manager at the Atlanta History Center. She's been with AHC for about 12 years, and in her current role as collections manager for 8.5. She's participated in 4 significant planned moves of collections, and so she's really well versed in planning for storage and juggling collections during renovations. So we look forward to hearing about your experience. And little known fact about Erica is she's a voracious knitter, and she actually took the fleece from one of their living collections, a Gulf Coast sheep named Buster, and she processed it by hand all the way to a sweater. So Erica, we look forward to seeing that sweater. Maybe you can share a pic. That'd be awesome. And Jean Riley, Patterson Pope, he's on our team and is a museum specialist. He's been with us for a long time, 12 years at Patterson Pope, but over 30 in this industry. So he's lots of experience working with museum folks. He's in the Atlanta area, serves really all around Georgia. So many of you Georgites know him well. Little known fact about Gene is that he's been playing tennis for over 50 years and still plays competitively, even though I can't convince him to convert to pickleball. We're still working on it. So Erica, Gene, glad you're here. Take it away.
Thanks, Calvin.
Great, thanks, Calvin. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you all. And good morning. Again, my name is Erica Haig. My pronouns are she, hers. A visual description of me is I'm a light-skinned woman with dark brown hair and glasses, and today I'm wearing a red shirt. If you're not familiar with Atlanta History Center, we are a 33-acre museum with extensive exhibits, gardens, archival collections, and several historic houses that is operated as a private nonprofit. Founded in 1926 as a historical society, our mission is to connect people to history and culture. The main museum building, which you can see here, was built in 1992 and has had several additions, but those additions have not included additional storage space for museum collections. That includes the most recent addition, which is the Cyclorama building. In a 2018 survey of the archival, museum, and living collections leading up to the overhaul of our collecting plan, the need for expanding museum storage was identified. And that's sort of where this story starts with me and Gene, I think. So before we could make an informed decision about what sort of shelving we needed and where we were going to put it, we needed to be better aware of what we had. So during our internal work for our collecting plan in 2018 and 2019, I was able to do a survey of past donations at regular intervals to understand what the normal amount of space that we needed each year for new materials. I looked over the past year to start and grouped items into one of 8 categories based on material and size. You can see here our museum incoming space was bursting to full with a variety of items. And I would really encourage you to think about what are the sort of 6 to 8 normal things that you can maybe box or see coming in regularly on at your facility or your institution. I then looked into planned gifts and bequests to get an idea of what type and scope of materials that we might be bringing in the future as well. I also talked with the exhibit staff to better understand what their purchasing might look like over the next few years in regards to new exhibits. We tallied all of these numbers up roughly to get an idea of what type of shelving was needed and found that the majority of items were sort of in a banker's box size category, with some items or the follow-up being like some are wide or long, but not necessarily oversized or heavy. With this information and in conversation with Gene, I was able to identify that we needed compacting storage wider than a standard banker box size that allowed for those wide or long items to be easily stored alongside the smaller items. So where do we go from here? Once you know what you have and what sort of shelving you might need, the next step is identifying the space that might work to store the materials in. Typically, there's 3 options: reconfigure space that you have, which I'll talk about, reclaim a space from other uses, or remove to another building that you rent, buy, or build, which that's something that you'll hear about in a little bit later. We chose to reconfigure. We had 3 spaces that you can see here highlighted in red that we wanted to prioritize for shelving. All of these were already functioning and built out as collecting spaces. So they were all ready to be for collection storage. 2 spaces you've already seen photos of. That's our museum incoming space and our curator's workroom. The workroom housed 6 large tables with minimal shelves around the perimeter as a temporary research space. It's important to note that we have another research and study space that has large tables. So this workroom, the loss of this workroom for that was something that was okay. We were able to still have that space to do that work elsewhere. It's important to identify what else you need space for and adjacent to your storage space. So in our work study room or our curator's workroom, we were able to retain space for staff workstations. And that's going to be a really good workflow for us to be able to process items out of that space and into permanent storage. The third space that I mentioned had static shelving already in it that housed a wide variety of items, as you can see here. It is important to note that these chairs don't typically live there. They were pulled for an exhibit. They're being staged in the hallway. And that this static shelving worked great for us. We just needed more of it. And we did a walkthrough with Jean with this, and we got to talk a lot about different storage options and specifically about the possibility of retrofitting these older shelves onto new carriages for compacting storage. And Jean, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about the walkthrough process.
Yeah, the walkthrough process that we started in 2019 on this project, and yeah, we just kind of came in and talked concept for design, look at the existing shelving so we can match it up with what we have, and kind of measure the area and come up with concepts and what Erica in the History Center wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, and that was super helpful for us. We were able to sort of make a case for the additional storage and showing what we were doing as a cost saving measure and add that all into like the final budget line. We chose these three spaces after a more extensive walkthrough with Jean. We spent several hours walking through all of our facility areas and identifying other potential spaces for growth. But this was these three spaces were the ones that would take the shortest amount of time and the smallest cost for the largest amount of storage space gained. So those were good choices, I think, for us. The course of new storage never did run smooth, though. So our project's main snag was funding and finding funding, specifically during COVID-19. Jean was able to give us that initial quote and drawings for the storage, which was super helpful in creating that budget. But we also were trying to look at other things that might need to happen in that space, right? We didn't need to worry about HVAC, but we did want to time that with additional installation of Wi-Fi hubs to expand our Wi-Fi access downstairs in, the basement. And we also wanted to make sure that the budget included things like chairs, desks, supplies, staff time, all of which we identified as needs for this project moving forward. We decided to roll this into the renovation of our exhibits for our upcoming 100th anniversary. With the exhibits being renovated, there was a space concern with all of those items coming down off of the exhibit. So while space was a high priority, it really was the exhibits that were driving this as a main need. We decided to roll the cost of this exhibit into the upcoming fundraising for the exhibit work, since none of the exhibit work could move forward without that space being available. This worked out pretty well, and once we had a final timeline for exhibits and a green light from leadership for funding, we were able to do a final site visit, check the measurements one last time, and then update the quote and put the order in with Jean. We also at that time ordered the rest of the supplies that we identified as needs, and then we got to the real work. We anticipated needing about 4 months or about 16 weeks to move all the materials. This was based off of a rough estimate of 15 minutes to move and update each item. We ended getting about 14 weeks to move about 4,000 items that were in these 3 areas. To facilitate this, I blocked off time on my calendar in advance and ensured that those times were held for this project, so no one could schedule over those times. As project lead, I also blocked off the last 2 weeks of the project. So like when we were leading up to the install, those last 2 weeks were blocked off to make sure that if there were any last minute things that needed to happen, I would be there and be able to do those things. I was also able to utilize 2 exhibit staff for about 2 days each week, and I had an additional staff member that came in for the last 2 weeks to help out with that final push of items moving out. I did start all of my newer staff with the easier materials. These were all items that were in our main collection storage area, and these all had tags and assigned location, and were generally easy to find a new home for back in the rest of our storage area. We had pre-identified drawers and shelves with open slots, and we tried to work from the largest item to the smallest item whenever possible. Meanwhile, I worked on the museum incoming and curator's workroom, which were more difficult as items were in various stages of processing. There were some items that were in the process of abandonment, which is a 7-year system here in Georgia. And then we also found several FITS items. Whenever possible, we took the time to do, at the very least, basic catalog records of items so that they were processed through and had additional information that we could track them by. Having laptops facilitated this work so we could go between spaces and enter the information directly into our database. As a plus to this, we were able to resolve many FITS items and consolidate all of our abandoned materials. So we have set aside specific spaces for both those materials. After 14 weeks, though, we successfully cleared out all of the spaces to the extent that they needed to be able to start the installation. This work was only possible because of the planning done by myself and Jean, and of course my former colleague Kelsey Fritz, and with the assistance of my collections and exhibits team, Jen Glaze, Bailey Yeager, Deb Wold, and additional assistance by Sydney Everett, Tim Ferlingos, and Gordon Jones, even though he did sometimes move items in while we were trying to move items out. That's okay, we still love him. And we did have to make sure that we had space for supplies as well. This is something that Jean sort of prepared me for. We had identified 2 areas for the supplies, and I had already communicated that we would be using this space to our buildings and facilities folks here. Jean, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the staging of materials and how much room approximately is kind of needed for this sort of work.
Sure. I mean, what you're going to get is like an erector set. I mean, most of this stuff comes knocked down so we can get it in and out of buildings. And you really need to have as much space as possible to stage it. As you can see here, we stuck stuff in, room we weren't working on at the time. And then also, line the hallway in it. But you need to allow a lot of area to stage this at, or coordinate your deliveries so you can have stuff coming in and out on a timely basis.
Yeah, and the coordination was really helpful for us because we were able to stage it in two batches. So the first batch had all of the first round of stuff, and the second one had all of the shelves, which would need to go in. Something also to note is that I worked closely with our security and building staff at this point to make sure that they were updated about the project, that they knew the contractors' faces, that the contractors had badges. And I checked in regularly with the staff from Patterson Pope that were on site. So they're aware of where things were going, what else might be happening that day, and just things to keep an eye out for. So the removal of the shelves went really fast. These did need to be stored somewhere else though. So they were being reused in another space. So once they came down, they also had to have storage space for those. So that's something to keep in mind, is that if you are keeping your old shelving, where is it going? And pre-identify those spaces. Once the room was cleared out, this was kind of shocking for everyone. We had an ooh and ah moment, and then we began the install of the rail. Jean, and I think that you can probably talk a little bit more about how the rail works, and then
first, what you really want to look for in a high density system is specifically the rail, is you want a rail that can be grouted and leveled. There are a lot of systems out there that are just rail that just gets slapped down on the floor, and if your floor is out of whack, you're going to have some drifting on it. So you want a system where that you can have it find the high spot, level it, and have a system that's not going to run on you. And then you want to come in and you're going to put a decking on there, and you want to do an MDX board, or you want to do a steel decking. That way you will not have any off-gassing. Most plywood will be off-gassing, whereas an MDX board doesn't. So you want a high-quality decking on there to level up with the top of the rail. And then after that, we come in and we'll put, in this case, we put a gray rubber matting on there that we staple down, because if you put glue on there, once again, you're going to have off-gassing from that. But we've found that this rubber mat stapled down works real well for us. And as you can see there, we've got some of the carriages getting ready to go down on the system, and that's the whole system as far as the carriages that go left and right.
Yeah, and these are, you can see on the end, the ones that's tipped up on its side is one that is going to be a static range on the end. And all of the static ones got anchored down to the floor or the wall, just for safety and security. Once the shelving started going up, it went pretty fast. They started from one side and then they worked down the way to the other. They built out the main base first with the end caps, and then just keep on sort of plugging and chugging along until they can go through and add all the remaining shelvings sort of all at once. They do this so everything can be at a standard height across all the shelves. Finally, they add the top shelves and the end caps. The chains on the end caps get attached to the handle that you see here, and then also a wheel at the bottom of the carriage that allows the carriage to move back and forth.
And one other point, as far as your end panels go, make sure that your manufacturer gives you a steel powder coated end panel. They give you a laminate one, it's going to off gas as well. So powder coat paint.
All of the end caps for us matched the shelving that we chose, so it's very nice. And they can do it in a variety of colors too, which is also nice. So a few then and nows of the project. Here's our museum incoming, which was reconfigured some. You can see the additional new oversized shelving sort of in the middle of the photo on the right. And then all of the shelving on the rightmost side of the right photo is all of that reused shelving from our curator's workroom. We also have the curator's workroom here. It was completely refitted with compacting high density shelving. This increased the amount of material and workflow of materials in the space. We'll be putting desk space on the left-hand side of the room. So we'll be able to have workstations actually in this area to help process materials. And then finally, our museum storage area had its old static shelving retrofitted. So those ranges that you can see that are labeled as C and D in the left-hand photo were put onto carriages basically. And then we had new shelving added. So we had added 2 additional double-sided ranges to this space by moving to compacting storage here. So post-install, there's some things that I did that I think that I'd like to pass along to people. One was preparing supplies for labeling the shelves and lining them with new Ethifoam. These supplies were researched, budgeted for, and bought in advance, and then we stored them in an adjacent area until the first space was done, at which time we started prepping the shelves for items. The second was updating all of the locations in our database to ensure that all old locations were blown out and that all new items would be correctly located as they were moved to these new locations. Finally, we started talking about deaccessioning items in a more regular way and what future storage needs will be. Normalizing this long-term planning and removal of materials that no longer suit your collecting plan can be really difficult, but it doesn't need to be. I think that this project helped leadership be aware of the cost of keeping all of the materials that we do have and what that looked like for our collecting plan overall. I do have a few resources linked in a document that will be shared with you afterwards. I hope that if you have specific questions for Jean or me, that you'll put them in the Q&A box. And I'll pass it on over back to Calvin. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. Really appreciate it. That's a lot of info quickly, we realize, and that could definitely be talked about in the course of over an hour. But do drop in Q&A and we'll get to as many as we can before the top of the hour, and then we're going to continue Q&A afterwards for those that can stay if there are still questions at that time. So just keep dropping them in there. So we're going to switch gears now to new construction. So planning for storage in a new construction expansion situation. And we have with us Stephen Mott and Kristen Orman. Come on in, guys. Welcome. Stephen is the curator of the collections and interpretation at Florence County Museum. He's a Florence native, actually, and joined the museum in 2007 in his current role as curator in 2008. So he's celebrating his 17th year at the museum. Congrats, Stephen. That's awesome. He oversaw the massive construction project of their current museum, which is a beautiful showpiece in downtown, right there in downtown Florence. And in fact, it's really an anchor of downtown now. So if you haven't seen pictures, jump on Google and check it out. It's really a beautiful, beautiful place. A little known fact about Steven is he's a guitar collector and a bluegrass flat picker. So he plays bluegrass guitar, in case you don't know what that means. I had to look it up, Steven. And Kristen Orman is on our team at Patterson Pope, a museum specialist, has been with Patterson Pope for 25 years, believe it or not. It's crazy. She lives in the Charleston area and covers really kind of Columbia on down through the Low Country, and lots of you people in South Carolina know her well. A little known fact about Kristen is she's an accomplished water ski instructor, especially with her kids' friends. So if any of you have young kids that need to learn how to ski, she is your woman. Thanks, guys. Take it away.
All right. Hang on one second while I get my screen ready to share. And hopefully this looks good for everybody. Okay. So, hello, everyone. Good morning or afternoon, as the case may be, depending on where you are. Thank you to the Southeastern Museums Conference, to Zinnia Willits, and to Patterson Pope for inviting me to participate in today's webinar. Today, we'll be talking about planning for new collection storage for museums. If some of you are joining us from other kinds of institutions like university special collections, municipal archives, or historical societies, or any other kind of collections holding body, you will hopefully all find some worthwhile advice in today's presentation. My name is Stephen Mott. I'm the curator of collections and interpretation for the Florence County Museum in South Carolina. This is what I look like, and this is what our museum looks like. This facility opened to the public 10 years ago, and it'll be 10 years ago this October. It was a huge upgrade from the small museum that we grew up in. We went from about 2,800 square feet to 28,000 square feet. And when we put out the RFPs for architects for this project about 12 years ago, I started to get a lot of phone calls from companies who were soliciting products and services. It was a little bit overwhelming, so much so that I stopped answering the phone after a while. But there was one person who just kept calling back, and I'm glad that they did. And that was Kristen Orman from Patterson Pope. After securing her services to assist with the design of our new collection storage area, and after years of planning, we were finally ready to move into our new building. All right. And here's a snapshot of the results. Because of the shape of the room, it's difficult to get a lot in one photograph, but here you can see we have a variety of storage equipment. We have two-dimensional flat storage over here on the left. We have high-density powered mobile cabinets on the right, and we have art racks on the top. We'll be looking more at some of this later in the presentation. Now, as our museum enters our 10th year of operations, our museum's footprint in the community has grown, our programs have grown, and our collections have grown. So much so that we are currently planning for a 15,000 square foot addition to the building, which will include, among other things, a new 1,500 square foot dedicated collection storage area specifically for our art collections. Because I've gone through this process of collection storage and design 10 years ago, I've gained enough perspective to identify a lot of the strengths and weaknesses of the overall circumstances of our storage, especially as they relate to our specific collections and workflow. So when Patterson Pope asked me to participate in today's webinar, I had an opportunity to put all that perspective onto paper. And this is what I came up with. These 6 categories represent for me the principal stages of development for collection storage planning. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about was covered or is going to overlap with what Erica has already talked about. How objects enter the collection, the anticipation of needs, retaining the usefulness of purpose to your spaces, the coordination of schedules and pre-planning, and the accessioning. So as I was thinking all this out and I came up with these categories, it occurred to me sort of like, well, I'll read them out quickly. So there's first your assessment and survey. That's the first step. And then you start to think about the future in terms of the past, where you want to be versus where you are now. And then I started thinking about other parts of collection storage that aren't necessarily taken up by collections objects. This would be your negative spaces, but also other spaces, things that areas that you'll be storing things in, right? But they're not necessarily collection items. And then thinking about how your physical collections management relates to your digital collections management. And then lastly, your concerns about security and emergency planning. So it's kind of like a game of Trivial Pursuit, right? If you get all the questions right in all 6 categories, what happens, right? You win the game, or at least you should. You should feel like you've won. So that was my approach to putting this presentation together. And I'm going to go through briefly with you all 6 of these categories. I've also provided my notes to the webinar's organizer for distribution, so all of you can follow along as I talk, and also use the notes for reference later if you find them helpful. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the assessment and the survey. This is a 2-part situation. The first is the assessment. Only you are going to know what you need, right? You are the one who works in the space. This is an assessment of your current working conditions, and this is what it's like to work in your storage. It's an experiential thing. What are the pros and cons of your storage situation? What improvements do you need or want? So again, the assessment is on you. That is what you're bringing to the table. And then the survey is the physical accounting of your collections and your new project space. This will also most likely include a sort of survey of your existing storage so that your consultant, if you're lucky enough to have one, can help you think through what is working and not working. So this is really where your collections consultant comes in. That's the survey. On many levels, how well these 2 things converge is what will define the success of your new project. So during the next stages, this is what your collections storage consultant is going to be doing. They're going to be forecasting your needs based on the assessment and the survey. They're going to be taking a look at the size, the shape, and the scope of your collection. How big is it? What is it composed of? And what are its potentials? Kristen, you want to throw anything in here?
Well, it's typically math and a whole bunch of questions, but and I'll talk about it a little bit later on, it's communication that's probably the most key, being able to come up with a solution, and it takes a little while, but it's a collaborative process. And I've never really thought of myself that way, but that's a
Yeah.
that's a good one.
So it'll look somewhat like this, right? Your assessment is one big part of that first stage. The survey is where the collections consultant comes in. And in this diagram, where those 2 things overlap, that is where the plan will develop. This is a very, very critical stage. And, so definitely think about it in 2 parts, or it was helpful for me to think about this stage in 2 parts. So the next thing is thinking about the future in terms of the past. And in some cases, you have to shrink to grow. I think that we all are familiar with deaccessioning. And as you are looking to migrate your collections into a new space, you do not want to burden yourself by moving one problem from one place to another, because that will take up not only your space, your new space, but your time. And these large-scale projects, staff time is going to be at a premium, so don't overburden yourself. Start deaccessioning things before it gets serious. Identify what you quote unquote want or what you don't want. Identify conflicts with your collections policies. Identify ill-fitting collections, etc. Again, I think most of us are familiar with this, but the trick here is to get ahead of it so it is not becoming an issue later in the process. The second thing is, and Erica touched on this a little bit, is, how do your collections grow, right? They grow when new objects enter the building, enter the collection. So for us as a case study, I just broke this down into two things: donations and purchases. Donations are things that you can't always predict. They're coming for you. And purchases are things that you can somewhat predict and you're going for them. For our museum, donations usually come in the form of historical objects. These are usually small or medium size. It's a little bit of a moving target. It could be a pocket watch. It could be a quilt. You have no idea. So plan for a variety of storage equipment. If you're a museum that collects historical objects, you know this already. You need to plan for a variety of equipment. For example, high density mobile cabinets with drawers, static shelves for larger items. Try to accommodate all options. And for purchases, for us, for our museum, that mostly means 2D art, right? That's where our collections are growing the most. And they're a little bit more predictable, right? So with 2D art, it's either framed or it's unframed. If it's framed, you'll need some vertical bin storage and art racks. And if it's unframed, you'll put it in a flat file somewhere, most likely. So here are a few photos of our collection storage area. These are our vertical bins, and I love these. These are incredibly useful. Kristen was able to anticipate the need for this when she came to survey our collections, 11, 12 years ago. I've already requested more of these because they're incredibly versatile and very useful. For oversized things, we have art racks. You may have some art racks that look something like this. There are different kinds. So what kind you end up with will depend on your space, and your collection storage consultant is going to help you through that. We also have lots of items like this. These are some of the earliest objects that were collected by our museum. So we needed storage specifically for these. So we have cabinets with pull-out drawers for this. Lots of objects like this in our collection, so we have lots of cabinetry to accommodate that. We also have a lot of archival things. These are not, file cabinet archives, but these are shelving archive materials. You probably have a lot of things that look like this, and you saw in Erica's part of the presentation that she certainly is working with a lot of objects like this too. So you're going to need some open shelving for those types of things. We also have some custom storage for specific collections items. The things in this open cabinet right here are for one accession lot. These are uniform items that once belonged to some German POWs who were held here at barracks at an Army air base at the end of World War II. So there's a custom element to this also. Again, if you have poorly documented collections, they're going to haunt you. They're going to come for you. You don't want that to happen. You want to be able to anticipate those needs. Deaccessioning is going to be a part of that. Don't let it happen to you when you're in the midst of your large new project. The third thing we're going to talk about is negative space, what I call negative space and personal space. You're going to be working in this new space, so take advantage of the opportunity and don't overlook its importance. The takeaway here is to leave room for yourself. Negative space is for the purpose of safety and art and object handling. That's the room that you leave for uncrating artworks, for opening your cabinet doors, for rolling your carts around the room, for transitioning objects to and from shelves, cabinets, racks, carts, or your examination tables. If you can get this, think about wide aisles in your high density storage. Get them as wide as you can get, because you want to get in and out of there with your cart. You want to be able to open the doors and still have room for yourself to move around. Maybe you need to bring your laptop into the aisles with you. Think about your negative space. And then there's personal space. You saw that Erica was using at times some sort of makeshift areas for workstations, and they had to plan for workstations in their collection space. Sometimes sometimes institutions will have a work area inside of storage, and sometimes it'll be outside of storage. This is just depending on your needs. But you're going to have a desk, a chair, your file keeping for your hard copies of deeds and loan agreements. What about your binders? What about your manuals and other reference materials? So here in pale yellow, these are all your negative spaces. This is our preliminary drawing from the architects for what our new collection storage area might look like. And so any place with an arrow is a circulation space. It's a negative space. So you want to be able to enter the room safely. You want to be able to get your art on and off of the art rack safely. You want a lot of room around your examination tables and things like that. So a lot of this is common sense, but it's an incredibly important part of storage. When you first start your project and you've got money on the table and you've got a new space on the way, you think, oh, it's exciting. It's like buying a new house. You're thinking about all the things you're gonna do to fill up the space and make it yours, but you can't fill it all up or it won't be useful. You have to leave room for yourself. And so if you're gonna have your own workstation and collection storage, you might as well make it nice. Again, think about yourself. We all have things like this. We all have our MRM, our nomenclature, our binders full of notes and policies, and your pest management records, your environmental data records, your past perfect software manuals. So if this is in your collection storage area, think about where that's going to go and how it's going to relate to actual object storage. The fourth thing is what I call positive space and then other space. Positive space is everything that's taken up by your collection storage furniture. But then we all know that the job isn't done after the object lands on the shelf, because museum storage is not just about space for objects. You have other things that you need space for also. So collections care requires supplies, boxes, lids, your custom enclosure materials, your mat board, your foam board, your nitrile gloves, your labeling kits and labeling supplies, rolls of Tyvek or glassine, or your Mylar rolls, folders, buffering materials, poly wrap for framed paintings, etc. All the things that you're going to use require safe, accessible, and environmentally controlled storage. And you want them to be convenient, right? That's the accessibility portion. And you want them to be well cared for. So they're going to need environmentally controlled storage. What about your other tools and equipment? Right? Do you have a heap of vacuum? Do you have a portable dehumidifier for emergencies? I think most of us do. If you're going to have powered mobile storage, then you might get some battery backups if you have an energy emergency. So the takeaway message here is do not inconvenience yourself. Factor all these potential needs into your storage space if you do not already have a solution and location for them. Yeah, again, we all have things that look like this. We have lots of spaces in the back end of the museum around our collection storage area for materials like this. These are actually some overflow storage supplies that I have in my office. So these are things that we'll eventually need, but we didn't have room for in collection storage. And then the other thing is the relationship between physical storage and digital storage, and what to anticipate as you're moving your collections into your new storage space. This will apply to a brand new storage space, and it will apply if you're renovating space. Erica talked about this also. Physical storage is half of the job. Migrating collections into a new space means that every item must be updated in your collections management software. And that is a lot of registration work on the back end. Even if you're only moving 1,200 items, which is nothing, that's still 100 records a month that you're going to have to update over a 12-month period. Do you want to spend an entire year sitting at your collections workstation trying to update records for all the things that you just moved? No, and you're probably not going to have time for that anyway, because every museum worker knows this. We don't all have the luxury of committing ourselves to working in one space for one purpose at one time. We're all working on lots and lots of different projects. So this is a very, very conservative estimate of the number of records in a given time that you might be able to update and process. In all likelihood, it would be less than this. If your collection is from 6,000 to 10,000 artifacts, then you're going to be working more slowly than this, but you can get ahead of the problem. How can your consultant help you? After the survey is done and the design is approved, you're going to have some time on your hands. All your new furniture has to be ordered. Construction has to be finished. The equipment has to be installed. All the contract work has to pass inspection, et cetera, et cetera. Take advantage of this time to preset new locations in Past Perfect and get your objects ready to move. Again, Erica talked about this in her presentation, and you can't take this part of it too seriously. Again, don't do anything to inconvenience yourself, and just plan for all the time that it's going to take to do it well. So this is, if you don't, this is what you're going to look like. This is two museum registrars frantically trying to solve the problem of how they're going to manage thousands of records in a short amount of time as objects are being moved from one place to another. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is security and fire suppression. These were concerns that came in during the final stages of our previous collection storage design. So it's not just about the objects. So secure your room. You want to get controlled access, who is entering the room and how, electronic keys, code entry, camera placement, monitoring, and collaborate with your storage consultant to address all of these issues. Cameras are a big thing. That's going to be a part of the design, plotting out where your collection storage furniture is going to go and how that relates to your cameras. I found some old papers from long ago when we were going through this process. I think they can still do this. This is a thing called Fire Park, where it integrates with your security control panel. If there's a fire emergency, it will actually automatically space out your cabinet so that fire suppression can get down in there. So there are ways to integrate that kind of security into your plan. So like Kristen said before, it's a very collaborative process. Ask a lot of questions. They're going to be asking, your consultant is going to be asking you a lot of questions. Be very flexible and reach out to others for advice. Again, this is all about communication, and that's it. Like I said, I've supplied all the notes for this to the webinar's organizers. If you guys want to reach out to them, or you can reach out to me directly at the Florence County Museum if you have any specific questions. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. That is great stuff. And what we're going to do now is we're going to jump quickly to Q&A, and we'll hit as many as we can here in the next few minutes, and then we'll continue on after the hour for those that can stay. One quick thing I want to mention is we are planning to do a follow-up to this webinar specifically about the types of solutions. So we didn't have time to get into those types of solutions today, other than what we talked about a little bit. So we will do a follow-up webinar that Kristen and Jean will primarily lead to talk about those types of solutions. So let's jump into Q&A, and you guys can pull those up as well, and I'll just kind of jump us through, and maybe we'll just one person answer would be great. And yeah, you can just stop sharing your screen there, Stephen, if you don't mind. That'd be great. So first question is, are areas of growth targeted, like we would really like to acquire X, or is growth based on what is donated, received?
I would say both. I think you need to take into account whatever you think is coming down the road and whatever you've received in the past. And it's kind of like that picture Stephen showed you of the woman over the, trying to tell the future. I would try to take any way your collection may change or grow into account as we start these conversations.
Great. Thank you. This one is for Eugene. So was the rubber mat Oddy tested, ODDY, tested? And what's the brand name, if you know or remember?
You're muted.
Thank you. It's made by Durable, and we have had it tested out.
Okay.
We've
Great.
been like all the systems at the Atlanta History Center have it. So
Awesome. Thank you. And Stephen, we lost your video, if you don't mind letting us see your face again as we answer. Thank you.
Here I am.
So I'm going to defer this question. Kristen and Jean, you may not answer this one. Where do you recommend buying shelving from? We'll let Erica and Stephen answer that.
Oh, I just let Kristen do all of that stuff. She's your collections consultant is going to be the one who's the most familiar with the types of products that are available that best suit your needs. So a lot of the shelving that we got, I think this was Space Saver and maybe another manufacturer. We got a variety. We have storage. We even have static shelving that we bought for other areas of the building. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
at one point on that, Calvin, is that I went bring that on you. Is that I can't remember now what I was going to say. Go
That's
ahead.
all right. I got you covered. So it really is important to find an expert in your area, because and by the way, we have people from all over the country and internationally today. So we serve kind of the Southeast area up through Ohio, but they're depending on where you are in the country, find an expert, and Space Saver as the manufacturer is top of the line. So we would just mention that, and we'll get into more specifics in our next webinar.
I remember now, on a high density system, we can have various products on different ranges. We could have one range that could have art storage on it. We can have another one that's going to be an artifacts, and then another one we can do, banker boxes on it. So we can design a system to handle all your artifacts or whatever your collection is going to be, and each range can be different.
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks. Do you recommend any formula to determine future space needs? You spoke about using kind of banker box size, but any formula?
So what I did was look at like items that we had brought in the past year, ran a list of those accession numbers, looked at the materials and the size. You can pull that from your database if you trust the measurements were right. We went through and we saw, like, is it like banker's box sizes are pretty standard across most things. It's like, is it bigger than a bread box, right? Is it bigger than a banker's box? And that's sort of one of the criteria that we had. The other one was material type. So we have an entirely different area that is just for textiles. And so textiles were something that we're looking at, but we identified that that wasn't a large area of growth for us. So the majority of the materials that we had brought in the past year, and then I looked again at 5 years and then 15 years, sort of as like large scope. I'm not looking at every individual object because that would take forever. But I did look at database listings and like sort of made assessments based on type of items and grouped them, filtered them, and sort of got the assessment that way. When needed to, I went into the collections and actually physically put eyes on objects to say, oh yes, that is large, or oh no, that is actually quite small. So that's sort of how we tallied or made a rough tally of what sorts of materials we had been getting in.
Great. Thank you. This one, while you have the mic, Erica, this one's directed to you. You mentioned how many staff members were involved in your storage project?
That's a great question. So I am technically a team of 1. I currently have 2 full-time staff members that are exhibits based, and so they are project focused. I was able to sort of borrow them from their projects, which are digitization and registration of exhibit materials. So we were digitizing museum objects. They're currently on exhibit, or have recently been on exhibit, and that is, they're under me, they work under me, but their funding is from exhibits, if that makes sense. So all of the registration and collections work is me. So if you are a team of one, this can be done. Just budget your time accordingly, and you really have to defend your time. So time blocking works really well for me. And that's something to consider if you're looking at this project.
And find a teammate like Jean or Kristen to be an outside teammate for you. Next question. Do you have any suggestions for digital databases for collections that get checked in out frequently?
Well, I'm not sure that I know what they mean by check in, check out, but Past Perfect is a pretty standard collections management software. There are others, so hopefully I'm understanding the question correctly.
Okay, thank you. And feel free for follow-up questions, guys, if you have any as we're answering these, drop them in the Q&A. Next, when considering museum storage, is there any advice, tips, and areas we should consider when planning for open storage? So the management of and planning around inviting member of public into storage spaces, tours of storage, for example.
Maybe Xenia should answer that one.
We run tours of our storage space as a sort of paid group tour. Something that I like to keep in mind with this is we want to make sure that there is open space to specific objects, and we've actually moved objects closer to end caps, so we don't have people traipsing down aisles or exposing other objects to potential people to like lean on them, touch them, leave their, keys on them, whatever they have in their hand, and have to go back for it. That's just something that you need to think about if you're going to be offering those tours. As far as open storage, we're actually in development now of an open storage area that's going to be in a exhibit space, a current exhibit space. So check back later. We'll see how that goes.
I have a project where we decided they're doing a bunch of museum cabinets, and we've decided a few at the front will be visual. And so therefore, when they invite people in, they can say, here, look at this. They don't have to open the cabinet. So those are things you can plan on too, besides just the window into your curative space.
Yeah, we've done that at Delta, Coca-Cola, and SCAD.
Yeah.
We have actual storage units in the exhibit space. So yes, we can do that.
Awesome. Thank you. Good stuff. So let's take a quick break. I will say as Heather comes on to wrap us up, and then we'll continue the Q&A beyond the hour for those that can stay. If you do have questions, regardless of where you are in the country, we can help you for sure to get connected with people who can answer those questions. So feel free to reach out. Heather will share our contact info. I'm speaking for myself and Kristen and Jean. We're glad to help with any resources that you might need as well. So.
All right, everyone. We appreciate you all so very much for contributing to our discussion today. Just such rich, important information to share. We thank you to our panelists for joining us today. And if you need to, sign off, please feel free to. I've shared the survey information in the chat. So if you'd fill that out, we would certainly appreciate the feedback. So if you can stay on, please feel free to as we continue to answer the questions. But, if you need to drop off now, we so appreciate you guys coming for today's discussion. And I will be sharing the video along with contact information, PowerPoint slides, and we just appreciate you coming, and be on the lookout for more information to come.
If you guys don't mind, I want to join this conversation. It's like my need to be part of collection storage discussions will never go away, regardless of what my title is.
Great. Yeah. So we'll just jump back into Q&A for the next 10 minutes or so, to cover any of the additional stuff that we haven't been able to get to. So we have, do you have any recommendations? Oh, it's moving on me. Sorry. Where did it go? Do you have any recommendations for grant opportunities for storage spaces, outside help for who can assess our spaces? And I will mention that we actually did that specific webinar back earlier, and we can maybe share that link. But anybody want to take that question as overall?
IMLS and NEH are two that we looked at. Both of them have programs that can include storage and projects, but you do need to look at what other things may be necessary in that project. If you're really early on in planning storage and you're not really sure what you have yet, you may also want to look at either a museum assessment program or the collections assessment for preservation programs. The first one's run out of AAM. The second one is run out of the AIC or FAIC. And they will come out and help you assess the collections, the preservation of those collections, and then also what you may need to look at storage-wise. And that's also a really good thing that you can do as a pre-grant approval, like planning for that, right? So having a cap or a map done prior to your grant application can look really good.
I'll just jump in that, and again, just background that I was at the Gibbs Museum of Art and we used Patterson Pope for a storage renovation, but we got Sustaining Cultural Heritage Collections grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. I will say we bought about $300,000, which fully funded not only the packing, temporary storage and return of our collections, which were about 10,000 pieces, but then also all the storage equipment. I did have to apply for that grant 3 times. NEH is a tough nut to crack, but I'm always available to talk through strategy there if anyone.
Awesome, thank you. Here's a great one. All these are great questions, but here's an interesting one. I'm an architect helping to plan a historical museum. Is there guidance or rule of thumb for percentage of area devoted to storage?
I think that, again, your collections storage consultant is going to be the principal contact here. In our situation, Patterson Pope was sort of on a subcontract with our architects. So that established a sort of firm method of communicating those needs during the project. So I don't know if it's applicable to this particular architect who's asking the question, but for us, they were, Patterson Pope was subcontracted. So there was lots of communication. Anything involved with the survey, went through Patterson Pope. And, we met independently with the architects to sort of discuss what our projected needs were for storage. So all that was sort of wrapped into the planning at the beginning of the project.
And kind of further on to what Stephen's saying, a lot of times if we can take a look earlier when the architect's understanding the space, because in the case of the Florence Museum, we actually annexed another room because he needed more collection storage. So, and that was just in design development. So that was just in looking at planning. So the sooner you can have other people looking at collection storage, the more successful it'll be. Did that make sense?
Yeah, we had a room that was going to be a sort of a work area for fabrication. Because I had been used to running my own fabrication shop, and it quickly became apparent that that was not a priority and that we were going to have to outsource all of that kind of stuff. So that room disappeared very quickly when Kristen said, "You don't have enough space," and I said, "Yes, ma'am."
Yeah, love it. Okay, next question. How do you keep mold out? Our uniform collection is in a very tight space and just found mold growing.
Yikes. Well, I mean, there's some built-in features in some of this cabinetry that can assist with that. I think that Kristen can certainly speak to that, or Jean.
Yeah, we have the museum cabinets where the inside air quality will not match the outside air quality for 3 days and they're sealed up. But you just need to make sure whatever you're putting in those cabinets is not carrying something in there and your HVAC is good there. So you kind of have to start with good HVAC and making sure whatever's going into the cabinets is well protected and then putting it in the cabinets. We have a client that had a infestation to their taxidermy, so there was a lot of stuff that we had to happen before they even put them back, or actually put them in cabinets. They were not in them. I think you have to look at it from 3 different ways: your HVAC, cabinets, and making sure what you're putting in doesn't have anything on it.
Great. Thank you. So that actually covered a few questions here. Can everyone, oh, that one moved on me. Can everyone involved talk numbers? How much were these projects? Loaded question.
I think it really is going to depend on your project. It's not even a it's not even a square footage equation. You know, it's going to be whatever your collection needs are. You know, how much space you have is obviously a part of it, but it's going to be what sort of equipment best suits your collections. There's not an easy answer here.
And I'll say, typically, budget is it's a big consideration. So what we always try to tell our clients is, let us come up with a whole game plan, right? Let's figure out the whole room, what we can do in the future, and build the structure of what you're going to need, and maybe pull back so that 2, 5, 10 years down the road, you can add to something existing rather than pulling things out and redoing the room. So once you get an overall plan, then we'll work back to the budget. I think that's the
Yep.
best opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, good. Just a couple more here. So this is the clarification from the earlier one. Items within our collections can be taken out by educators, so on and so forth, for programs and classes. Is there a digital database that you know of that would be able to easily keep track of what's checked out versus what's in?
Well, I think maybe Erica can speak to this also as a collections manager. But we have our own collections manager, our registrar, and any system will work. I mean, even if you're just tracking it on paper, that can work. But anytime any object moves at all, anytime somebody's hands touch a collections item, that needs to be recorded. So there's a record of it. Even if it's just briefly, if you're going to use it for some kind of program for educational purposes or some kind of show and tell to your board members or whatever it is, you really need to track when objects are in motion.
Just to add on to that, we do have educational or non-accession materials that can be checked out for programs or used for programs. Something to keep in mind is that you may not necessarily want the access to those into your secure storage space to be shared with all of your education staff. This is not to say that like anything wrong against education staff. I love our education staff, but they don't necessarily have handling experience for some of the other materials that are permanent collection pieces. They may also not have the background checks that are necessary to have access to that space. So if you are looking at this as a future need to have a separate space for those materials that they then access and pull materials out from, that's something to maybe keep in mind with your future planning. As far as a database or how to like work on that, I think that sort of goes beyond the scope of this panel, but I'm happy to talk with you about how we manage that if you'd like to email me. It's just my first name dot my last name at atlantahistorycenter.com, and I'll drop that in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll just jump back in and to answer the last one. And also just for those that are still on, Heather will share out these resources afterwards and we'll include our emails. So if you want to reach out to any of us specifically, and to this question, are our services available in Texas? We don't go as far west as Texas. We wish we did, maybe one day, but we do have really all over the country and internationally. We work with a company, Space Saver, and we are one of their dealers essentially, but there are really good museum specialists across the country that we can connect you with. So feel free to reach out to me and I'll connect you. And I believe that's all. So thanks again, Heather and Zinnia, for having us, and Kristen, Jean, Erica, and Stephen. Huge thanks to you guys.
Yeah, this is really great. Wonderful, wonderful job, guys. And again, be on the lookout for follow-up programs to come, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.